Before we begin, I need to warn you, this case will haunt you. Not just because of what happened to 42-year-old Jorge Torres Jr. on a Sunday night in February, but because of what was found on someone's phone the next day. What you're about to hear is a story that will make you question how well you really know the people closest to you, and how a single piece of evidence, recorded in the darkness, would expose a truth so disturbing that even seasoned detectives struggled to watch it. If you're new to Crime Case Voices, this channel is dedicated to telling the stories of victims who deserve to be remembered and bringing awareness to cases that demand justice. Please like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. And if the story affects you the way it affected me, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Now let's begin. February 24th, 2020, 1:01 p.m., Winter Park, Florida. A 911 call comes in to Orange County Dispatch. The voice on the other end is panicked, shaking, desperate. The woman is crying, gasping for air between words. "My boyfriend is dead," she says. The dispatcher asks what happened. The woman's voice cracks as she tries to explain. "We were playing last night," she says. "Playing a game, hide and seek. I put him in a suitcase. We were playing." The dispatcher asks her to slow down, to take a breath, to explain clearly. The woman says she fell asleep. She says when she woke up, he was dead. "He's purple," she says, her voice rising. "There's blood coming from his mouth. I don't know what happened." Orange County Sheriff's deputies race to the scene, an apartment complex near the intersection of Aloma Avenue and Goldenrod Road. A quiet neighborhood, middle-class families. Nothing out of the ordinary until today. When they arrive, they're led inside by the woman who called. Her name is Sarah Boone. She's 42 years old. Blonde hair, frantic, shaking. She leads them to the living room, and there on the floor is a blue suitcase. Hard shell, zipped closed. Deputies approach it carefully. One of them unzips it, and inside, curled up in an impossible position, is the body of 42-year-old Jorge Torres Jr. His skin is purple. His eyes are open. His mouth is bloody. He's been dead for hours. But who was Jorge Torres Jr.? And how did he end up dead inside a suitcase? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Let's get into who Jorge Torres was, and how his life led him to that apartment in Winter Park. Jorge Torres Jr. was born on February 13th, 1978 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He came into this world as part of a large, loving family. 6 brothers, 3 sisters. His parents, Jorge Sr. and Blanca Torres, worked hard to provide for their children. They raised them in a tight-knit household in Philadelphia County where family bonds meant everything. Jorge grew up surrounded by siblings, surrounded by noise and laughter and love. He was one of 10 children, and in that chaos he found his place. Those who knew Jorge in his younger years described him as a good kid, someone with a bright smile, someone who loved his family fiercely. His mother, Blanca, would later say that Jorge was her baby, that she loved him unconditionally, that no matter what struggles he faced in life, he was still her son, and she was still waiting for him to come home. By the time Jorge reached adulthood, he had become a father himself. 3 children, a daughter named Ana Victoria who adored her father, 2 other children who loved him despite his flaws. Jorge tried to be a good father. He tried to be present in their lives. But his own demons made that difficult. Because Jorge's life wasn't easy. He struggled with relationships. He struggled with anger. He struggled with alcohol. By his late 30s and early 40s, Jorge's life had become a series of failed relationships, legal troubles, and personal battles. He moved to Florida, hoping for a fresh start, but the problems followed him. In 2020, Jorge was living in Winter Park, Florida with his girlfriend, Sarah Boone. On paper, they were just another couple trying to make it work. In reality, their relationship was a powder keg waiting to explode. It was toxic, volatile, violent, the kind of relationship that neighbors whisper about, that makes people uncomfortable, that everyone knows is going to end badly. They just don't know how badly. Police had been called to Sarah and Jorge's apartment multiple times over the years for domestic disturbances. Both of them had been arrested before for violence against each other. In July 2018, there was an incident where Sarah was arrested and charged with battery by strangulation against Jorge. Both of them were taken into custody that night. The arrest report described a violent altercation. Sarah's hands around Jorge's throat, Jorge gasping for air. The charge against Sarah was eventually dismissed, but the arrest report painted a picture of a relationship spiraling out of control. Neighbors at their apartment complex would later testify in court about what they witnessed. Pearl Walker, who lived nearby, said she heard Sarah and Jorge fighting almost every single day, screaming matches that went on for hours, threats being hurled back and forth, the sound of furniture being thrown, glass breaking, doors slamming. She said it was constant, exhausting to listen to. She said she saw Sarah with bruises and injuries on multiple occasions. She said it was clear to everyone that this was not a healthy relationship. But no one intervened. No one called for help beyond the occasional noise complaint. They just listened to the fighting and hoped it would stop. It never did. By February 2020, Jorge Torres had withered to just 103 pounds. He stood 5'5". He was thin, almost skeletal, frail. His years of heavy drinking and poor health had taken their toll. He looked older than 42. He looked sick, weak, fragile. The kind of man who could be hurt easily. The kind of man who could fit inside a suitcase if someone wanted to put him there. And on February 23, 2020, Jorge Torres Jr. would spend his last day alive. He would wake up in that apartment with Sarah Boone. He would spend the day drinking wine with her, working on a puzzle, painting, listening to music, playing games, laughing and joking like everything was fine. Until suddenly, it wasn't normal anymore. Until suddenly, something happened that would end his life in the most horrific way imaginable. February 23, 2020 starts like any other Sunday for Jorge Torres and Sarah Boone. Sarah has the day off from work. Jorge is home with her. According to Sarah's later account to police, they spend the day together doing normal couple things. Cleaning the apartment, painting, working on a puzzle, listening to music, drinking wine. They open a bottle of Chardonnay around midday, then another bottle in the afternoon. By evening, they're both drunk, laughing, loose, in good spirits. At least that's what Sarah tells police later. She says they were having a good day. She says they were happy. She says there was no fighting, no arguments, no violence. Just two people enjoying each other's company, drinking wine, relaxing, having fun. As the evening goes on, Sarah says they decided to play hide and seek. She says it was Jorge's idea. She says they thought it would be funny. She says they were joking around, being silly, acting like kids. There's a blue suitcase in the apartment. One of those hard-shell Samsonite suitcases with a zipper that goes all the way around. It's not a huge suitcase, but it's big enough. Sarah suggests Jorge get inside. She says he thought it was hilarious. She says he was laughing, saying he could fit. She says he climbed in willingly, curling up into a ball, pulling his knees to his chest, tucking his head down. And then Sarah zips him in. She zips the suitcase closed with Jorge inside. She says they're both laughing. She says it's all a game. She says it's funny. But then something changes. Sarah takes out her phone. She starts recording. And what happens next is captured on video. Video that will later be found by investigators. Video that will be shown to a jury. Video that will shock everyone who sees it. Video that will prove, beyond any doubt, that this was no accident. In the first video, the blue suitcase is lying on its side on the living room floor. The camera is pointing down at it. You can hear Jorge's voice from inside. It's muffled because of the suitcase, but it's clear enough to understand. He's calling Sarah's name. Sarah, Sarah. He's saying he can't breathe. I can't breathe, babe. He's begging her to unzip the suitcase. Sarah, please, let me out. His fingers push at the zipper from the inside. You can see them clearly, pushing against the fabric, trying to find the zipper pull, trying to open it from the inside, but he can't reach it. He can't get enough leverage. He's trapped. And Sarah, she's standing there with her phone, recording him, and she's laughing. You can hear it on the video. That laugh, that cruel, mocking laugh. She says to Jorge, "That's what you do when you choke me." She's referencing the times he allegedly choked her during their fights. She's punishing him, making him feel what she felt. She says, "That's what I feel like when you cheat on me." She's referencing his alleged infidelity. She's making him suffer for it. Jorge keeps begging. He says he can't breathe. He says he needs to get out. His voice is getting more desperate, more panicked. You can hear the fear in it, the realization that this isn't a joke. This isn't funny. This is dangerous. He says, "Sarah, I can't breathe. Please." And Sarah, she just keeps recording. She doesn't help. She doesn't unzip the suitcase. She just stands there, watching, laughing, enjoying it. The first video ends, but Sarah isn't done. She records a second video. Same setup, same suitcase, same Jorge trapped inside. This time, his voice is weaker, more strained. He's been in there longer now. The air is running out. The carbon dioxide is building up. He's struggling to breathe. He's still begging, still pleading. "Sarah, please, I can't breathe. Let me out." His fingers are still pushing at the zipper, still trying to escape, but he can't. He's trapped, and Sarah is still there, still recording, still taunting him. She says more things, things about their relationship, things about what he's done to her. She's using this moment to punish him, to make him suffer, to make him feel what she's felt. She's not trying to kill him, not yet, but she's not trying to save him either. She's just letting it happen. At some point during the night, Jorge's hand manages to come out of the suitcase. His fingers find the zipper from the outside. He starts to unzip it. He's trying to free himself. He's using every ounce of strength he has left to pull that zipper, to open the suitcase, to get air. And that's when Sarah picks up a baseball bat. She later admits this in her testimony. She says she saw his hand coming out. She says she panicked. She says she was afraid of what he would do if he got out. So she hit his hand with the bat. She forced it back inside the suitcase. She stopped him from escaping. And then Sarah Boone does something unforgivable. She goes upstairs. She leaves Jorge zipped in that suitcase. She walks up to her bedroom. She gets into her bed. She pulls the covers up. And she falls asleep. While downstairs, one floor below, Jorge Torres is trapped, suffocating, dying, calling for help that will never come. 11 hours. That's how long Jorge Torres remained in that suitcase. 11 hours of darkness. 11 hours of struggling to breathe. 11 hours of calling for help that never came. Medical examiners would later determine that Jorge died sometime in the early morning hours of February 24th, probably around 3 or 4 a.m. He died from suffocation, from being trapped in that small, enclosed space with no air circulation, from breathing in his own carbon dioxide until his brain shut down and his heart stopped beating. Think about that for a moment. 11 hours. Imagine being curled up in a tiny space, unable to move, unable to stretch, unable to get air. Your lungs burning, your heart racing, panic setting in, screaming for help, begging someone, anyone, to let you out. And no one comes. No one helps. No one cares. Jorge Torres weighed 103 pounds. He was small enough to fit in that suitcase, but barely. He had to curl up tight. His knees pressed hard to his chest. His body contorted into an unnatural position. His spine curved. His neck bent. His arms pinned against his sides. And once Sarah zipped it closed, there was no way out. The zipper was on the outside. He couldn't reach it properly. He tried. The videos show his fingers pushing at the fabric, pushing at the zipper. But he couldn't get enough leverage, couldn't get enough force. He was trapped completely. As the hours passed, the air inside the suitcase ran out. Carbon dioxide built up. Every breath Jorge took pushed more CO2 into the small space. Every exhale made the air more toxic. His breathing became labored, difficult, painful. His body was fighting for oxygen that wasn't there. His brain was starving. His organs were shutting down, and upstairs Sarah Boone was asleep, comfortable in her bed, safe, warm, while Jorge was dying just one floor below her. The autopsy report would later reveal the full extent of Jorge's suffering. He had contusions on his forehead, on his shoulder, on his skull, blunt force trauma from thrashing against the hard sides of the suitcase, trying to break free. He had scratches on his neck and back where his skin rubbed against the fabric and the zipper. He had bruising on his hands, dark purple bruises on his knuckles and fingers from pounding on the suitcase walls, from hitting the hard plastic shell over and over, trying to make noise, trying to get Sarah's attention, trying to break through. He had a busted lip from hitting his face against the suitcase interior, blood in his mouth from the impact. These weren't the injuries of someone playing a game. These were the injuries of someone fighting for their life, someone trapped, someone terrified, someone dying slowly and painfully. Imagine what was going through Jorge's mind during those 11 hours. At first, he probably thought Sarah would let him out soon, that this was just her being mean, punishing him for a few minutes before unzipping the suitcase and letting him free. But as the minutes turned into hours, he must have realized something was wrong. She wasn't coming back. She wasn't letting him out. He was really trapped. And then the panic must have set in. The desperate, clawing panic of someone who knows they're going to die. He would have screamed until his voice gave out, pounded on the walls until his hands were bloody, tried every possible way to escape, to break the suitcase, to unzip it, to get air. But nothing worked. He was sealed inside. And slowly, inevitably, the oxygen ran out. His vision blurred. His thoughts became confused. His body went limp. And then, sometime in the early morning hours, Jorge Torres took his last breath. His heart stopped beating. His brain stopped functioning. And he died there, alone, in the dark, in that tiny blue suitcase. By the time the sun came up on February 24th, Jorge Torres had been dead for hours. His skin had turned purple from lack of oxygen. Livor mortis had set in. Blood had pooled in his mouth from internal injuries. His body was cold and stiff with rigor mortis. And Sarah Boone was waking up in her bed, stretching, yawning, probably thinking about coffee. About to make a phone call that would change everything. About to face the consequences of what she'd done. About to be arrested for murder. February 24th, 2020. 1:01 in the afternoon. Sarah Boone wakes up in her bedroom. She later tells police that her phone had been ringing. Multiple calls coming in. She ignored them. She was tired. Hungover from all the wine the night before. She didn't want to deal with whoever was calling. She just wanted to sleep. But eventually, the calls become too persistent to ignore. She picks up her phone, checks it, and that's when something clicks in her mind. A memory. A realization. Jorge. The suitcase. The game they were playing last night. Oh God. Jorge. Sarah gets out of bed. She goes downstairs. She walks into the living room. And there it is. The blue suitcase. Still zipped closed. Still lying on its side on the floor. Exactly where she left it the night before. She walks over to it. She bends down. She grabs the zipper. And she pulls. The zipper opens. The suitcase falls open, and inside is Jorge. His body is contorted. His skin is purple. His eyes are open, staring at nothing. His mouth is bloody. There's blood on his lips, on his chin, pooled inside his mouth. He's not breathing. He's not moving. He's completely still. He's dead. Sarah starts screaming. She's panicking now, shaking. She grabs her phone. She dials 911. At 1:01 p.m., the call connects. A dispatcher answers. 911, what's your emergency? Sarah's voice is frantic, hysterical. My boyfriend is dead, she says. The words tumble out fast. Too fast. She's crying, gasping for air. My boyfriend is dead. I don't know what happened. The dispatcher tries to calm her down, tries to get information. Ma'am, slow down. Tell me what happened. Sarah says, we were playing last night. I put him in a suitcase. We were playing hide and seek. And I fell asleep. and I woke up and he's dead. He's purple. There's blood. The dispatcher is confused. You put him in a suitcase? Sarah says yes. She says they were playing a game. She says it was supposed to be funny. She says she didn't know this would happen. I don't know what happened, she keeps saying. He's purple. He's not breathing. There's blood coming from his mouth. The dispatcher starts giving Sarah instructions. She tells her to check if Jorge is breathing. Sarah says no, he's not breathing. She tells Sarah to try CPR, to start chest compressions. Sarah says she's trying. She's pushing on his chest. But nothing's happening. He's not responding. He's cold. He's been dead for hours. The dispatcher keeps Sarah on the line, keeps telling her what to do. But it's too late. There's nothing anyone can do now. Jorge Torres is gone. Within minutes, Orange County Sheriff's deputies arrive at the apartment complex. They rush inside. They find Sarah in the living room, kneeling next to the suitcase, next to Jorge's body. She's crying, shaking, saying she doesn't understand what happened. The deputies assess the situation quickly. Jorge is dead. No question. His body is in full rigor mortis. He's been dead for many hours. This is a crime scene now. The deputies gently move Sarah away from the body. They take her outside. They sit her down. They start asking questions. What happened? When did this happen? How did Jorge end up in the suitcase? Sarah tells them the same story she told the 911 dispatcher. They were drinking wine yesterday. They decided to play hide and seek. Jorge got in the suitcase willingly. She zipped him in. They were both laughing. It was supposed to be funny. Then she went upstairs. She fell asleep. She passed out. She didn't wake up until this afternoon. When she came downstairs, she found him dead. She says it over and over. It was an accident. Terrible, tragic accident. She had no idea this could happen. She thought he could get out on his own. She thought the suitcase would just open. She thought he'd be fine. But the deputies aren't buying it. They're looking at the scene, looking at the suitcase, looking at Jorge's body. They're trained to recognize when something doesn't add up. And this doesn't add up. A 42-year-old man doesn't just die in a suitcase during a game unless something went very wrong. They ask Sarah if they can search her apartment. She says yes. They ask if they can look at her phone. She says yes. She hands it over without hesitation. She's cooperative, helpful. She wants them to understand that this was an accident. She has nothing to hide. But that cooperation is about to be her downfall. Because on Sarah's phone, investigators find the videos. 2 videos, both filmed by Sarah herself. Both showing Jorge trapped in the suitcase, begging for help. Both showing Sarah laughing at him, taunting him, refusing to let him out. And in that moment, everything changes. This isn't an accident. This is murder. And Sarah Boone just handed them the evidence. This case gets even more shocking from here. The videos Sarah recorded are about to become the key evidence in one of Florida's most disturbing murder trials. If you're finding this case as unbelievable as I am, hit that like button, share, subscribe, hit the bell and drop a comment below telling me what you think happened that night. Was it murder or was it self-defense? Let's get into the investigation and what happened next. February 25th, 2020, the day after Jorge's death. Sarah Boone is brought to the Orange County Sheriff's Office for questioning. She's not officially under arrest yet. She's cooperating voluntarily. She wants to help. She wants to explain what happened. Detectives sit her down in an interrogation room, the kind you see on TV. Small, gray walls, a table, 2 chairs, a camera recording everything. They turn on the recorder and start asking questions. Sarah tells her story again. She says February 23rd was a normal day. They woke up, had breakfast, did some cleaning, worked on a jigsaw puzzle together, painted, listened to music, drank wine. She says they drank 2 bottles of Chardonnay throughout the day. She says they were both drunk by evening. Happy drunk, laughing, having fun. No arguments, no fighting, just a good day together. She says around nighttime they decided to play hide and seek. She says it was spontaneous. She says Jorge suggested it first. She says they thought it would be funny. There was a suitcase in the living room, a blue hardshell suitcase. She says Jorge said he could fit in it. She says he climbed in willingly, curling up, laughing the whole time. She says she zipped him in. She says they were both laughing. She says it was a joke. Then she says she went upstairs, took a shower, got into bed, fell asleep. She says she didn't hear anything, didn't hear Jorge calling for help, didn't hear him screaming. She says she was passed out drunk. She says she woke up the next afternoon and that's when she found him dead. She says she panicked, called 911 immediately, tried to do CPR, but it was too late. She says it was a horrible accident. She says she never meant for this to happen. She says she loved Jorge. She says she would never hurt him intentionally. The detectives listen. They nod. They let her talk. They don't interrupt. They're giving her rope to hang herself. And then, when she's done, they show her the videos. The ones they found on her phone. The ones she recorded the night before. They pull them up on a laptop. They turn the screen towards Sarah. And they press play. The first video starts. You can hear Jorge's voice from inside the suitcase. Sarah, I can't breathe. You can hear Sarah's voice responding. That's what you do when you choke me. You can hear her laughing. The second video plays. More of the same. Jorge begging. Sarah taunting. Sarah laughing. The detectives watch Sarah's face as she watches the videos. They're looking for her reaction. And what they see is interesting. She doesn't look surprised. She doesn't look shocked. She just looks caught. She knew these videos existed. She recorded them. And now she has to explain them. Sarah's story starts to change. Now she says Jorge was threatening her. She says he was yelling at her from inside the suitcase. She says he was telling her he was going to beat her when he got out. She says he was going to choke her. She says he was going to kill her. She says she was scared. She says she was a victim of domestic violence. She says Jorge had abused her for years. She says he'd hit her, choked her, raped her, stabbed her. She says she lived in constant fear of him. She says that night, when he started threatening her from inside the suitcase, she panicked. She didn't know what to do. She was afraid to let him out. She was afraid of what he would do to her. So she left him in there, not to kill him, but to protect herself, to keep herself safe from his violence. The detectives aren't convinced. They ask her why she didn't just leave the apartment if she was scared. Why didn't she call the police? Why didn't she go to a neighbor's house? Why didn't she do anything except record videos of him suffering? Sarah doesn't have good answers. She stammers. She contradicts herself. She says she doesn't remember everything clearly. She was drunk. She was scared. She wasn't thinking straight. The detectives ask her about Jorge's hand coming out of the suitcase. They ask her about the baseball bat. Sarah admits it. She says yes, his hand came out. She says she hit it with a bat. She says she had to. She says he was trying to get out. She says she couldn't let him. She was too afraid. And that's when the detectives know they have enough. Sarah Boone has just admitted to trapping Jorge in the suitcase, refusing to let him out, and physically preventing him from escaping. That's not self-defense. That's murder. On February 25, 2020, Sarah Boone is placed under arrest and charged with second-degree murder. After Sarah Boone's arrest in February 2020, the case should have gone to trial within a year, maybe 2 at most. That's typical for murder cases in Florida. The evidence is gathered. The witnesses are interviewed. The trial date is set. Justice moves forward. But Sarah Boone's case was anything but typical. What followed was one of the most chaotic, bizarre, dysfunctional legal processes in Florida history. A process that would take over 4 years. A process that would involve 13 different attorneys. A process that would delay justice for Jorge Torres' family for far longer than anyone could have imagined. Let me say that number again. 13 different attorneys. Sarah's first attorney was a public defender appointed by the court after her arrest. Standard procedure for someone who can't afford a private lawyer. The attorney started working on the case, reviewing evidence, meeting with Sarah, discussing strategy. But within just a few months, that attorney filed a motion to withdraw from the case. The reason given in the court documents was irreconcilable differences with the client. Translation: Sarah was impossible to work with. The attorney said they couldn't represent Sarah because they fundamentally disagreed on how to approach the trial. Sarah wanted to do things her way. The attorney wanted to do things the legal way. They couldn't reach an agreement. The court granted the motion. Sarah got a second attorney. Attorney number 2 was also a public defender, also appointed by the court. And guess what happened? Same thing. After a few months, the attorney filed a motion to withdraw. Same reason. Irreconcilable differences. Sarah didn't like their strategy. She didn't trust their advice. She wanted control over every aspect of her defense. When the attorney pushed back, Sarah demanded a new lawyer. The court granted the motion again. Sarah got a third attorney. This pattern repeated itself over and over. Attorney 3 lasted a few months. Withdrew. Irreconcilable differences. Attorney 4. Same. Attorney 5. Same. Attorney 6. Same. Attorney 7. Same. All public defenders. All appointed by the court. All eventually giving up on Sarah Boone because she was too difficult, too demanding, too controlling. Court documents revealed details about Sarah's behavior. She would write long letters to her attorneys, sometimes 10, 15, 20 pages long, filled with legal theories she'd researched in jail, filled with demands about how her case should be handled, filled with complaints about how her attorneys weren't doing enough, weren't fighting hard enough, weren't listening to her. One attorney wrote in their withdrawal motion that no attorney can satisfy this client. Another said their relationship with Sarah had become adversarial, and they could no longer provide effective representation. Another suggested that Sarah should just represent herself because she clearly didn't want legal counsel anyway. The trial date kept getting pushed back. Originally scheduled for April 2023, then July 2023, then October 2023, then January 2024, then May 2024. Every time Sarah got a new attorney, the trial had to be delayed so the new attorney could get up to speed on the case. Months would pass. Then the attorney would withdraw. Then another delay. Then another attorney. Then another withdrawal. It was an endless cycle. And all the while, Jorge Torres' family was waiting. Waiting for justice. Waiting for closure. Waiting for the woman who killed their son, their brother, their father to finally face a jury. By July 2024, Sarah Boone had been through 8 attorneys. 8. The judge had finally had enough. Judge Michael Kranick ruled that Sarah had forfeited her right to court-appointed counsel. She would have to represent herself. No more public defenders. No more delays. The trial was moving forward. Sarah would be her own attorney, and that's when things got really weird. Sarah appeared at a court hearing in July 2024. She was representing herself. She submitted documents to the judge. And in one of those documents, she had hand-drawn an advertisement. A wanted ad, like something you'd see in an old Western movie. Wanted, attorney for Sarah Boone. The ad said she was looking for a lawyer who understood battered woman syndrome, who believed in her innocence, who would fight for her rights, who would take on her case pro bono or for low cost. It was bizarre, unprecedented, and somehow it worked. The ad was picked up by local news media covering the case. It went viral on social media, and an attorney named James Owens saw it. He reached out to Sarah. He volunteered to represent her. He would be attorney number 9, and unlike the 8 before him, Owens would actually stick with Sarah through the trial. Whether that was because he was more patient, more understanding, or just more desperate for publicity, who knows. But he took the case. And finally, after more than 4 years of delays, the trial was scheduled to begin. October 2024. Sarah Boone would face a jury for the murder of Jorge Torres Jr., but before that happened, prosecutors made one final attempt to avoid a trial. They offered Sarah a plea deal. Plead guilty to manslaughter instead of second-degree murder. Accept a 15-year sentence. Avoid the risk of life in prison. Sarah rejected it. She wanted her day in court. Can you imagine going through 9 lawyers before finally getting to trial? This case is absolutely wild, and it's about to get even crazier when the trial starts. Before we get into the courtroom drama, let me know in the comments, do you think Sarah should have taken that plea deal? Would you have taken 15 years or rolled the dice at trial? Let's keep going. October 14th, 2024. The Orange County Courthouse in Orlando, Florida. After 4 years, 8 months, and 9 attorneys, the trial of Sarah Boone finally begins. The courtroom is packed. Media, Jorge's family members, true crime enthusiasts who've been following this case since 2020. Everyone wants to see what happens. Everyone wants to see if Sarah will be convicted. A jury of 6 with 8 alternates is sworn in. The prosecution team is led by Assistant State Attorney William J. and Prosecutor Dave Cacciatore Jr. The defense is led by James Owens, Sarah's 9th and final attorney. Judge Michael Kranick presides over the trial. And on October 18th, 2024, opening statements begin. This is where both sides lay out their version of what happened on February 23, 2020. This is where they tell the jury what they're going to prove, what evidence they're going to present, what conclusion they want the jury to reach. Prosecutor William J. stands up first. He walks to the center of the courtroom. He looks at the jury, and he begins to speak. He tells them about Jorge Torres, a 42-year-old man, a father of 3, a son, a brother, someone with flaws, yes, but a human being who deserved to live. He tells them about February 23, 2020, about Sarah and Jorge drinking wine together, about the suitcase, about what Sarah did. And then Jay does something powerful. He reads from a transcript, the transcript of the videos found on Sarah's phone. He reads Jorge's words. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe. Sarah, please, let me out. He reads Sarah's words. That's what you do when you choke me. That's what I feel like when you cheat on me. The courtroom is silent as Jay reads. You can hear people in the gallery shifting uncomfortably. You can see jurors' faces change. They're understanding what happened that night. They're understanding how Jorge died. Jay tells the jury, this defendant zipped Jorge Torres shut in a suitcase. She was able to do this because at the time of his death, he weighed 103 pounds. Just 103 pounds. She did this with malicious intent. She did this to punish him, to make him suffer. And then she went upstairs to sleep and left him to take his final breaths on this earth alone. She left him there, trapped, suffocating, dying, while she slept comfortably in her bed 1 floor above. Jay pauses, lets that sink in. Then he continues. The evidence will show that Sarah Boone is guilty of second-degree murder, that she intentionally caused the death of Jorge Torres, that she knew what she was doing, that she had every opportunity to save him, and she chose not to. She chose to let him die. Jay sits down. The defense's turn. James Owens stands up. He walks to the jury, and he tells them a completely different story. He says Sarah Boone is not a murderer. He says she's a victim of years and years of brutal domestic violence at the hands of Jorge Torres. He describes the abuse Sarah allegedly suffered, the beatings, the choking, the threats, the terror. He says Jorge Torres was a violent, dangerous man. He says he hurt Sarah repeatedly. He says she lived in constant fear of him. He says she had scars, bruises, injuries from his attacks. He says the relationship was toxic and abusive and Sarah was trapped in it. Owens tells the jury about battered spouse syndrome, a psychological condition where victims of long-term abuse develop a heightened sense of danger, where they believe their abuser will kill them, where they feel they have no choice but to fight back, to protect themselves, even if it means using deadly force. He says that's what happened on February 23, 2020. Owens says yes, Sarah put Jorge in the suitcase. Yes, she zipped him in. Yes, she left him there. But it wasn't murder. It was self-defense. He says when Jorge was inside the suitcase, he started threatening Sarah, telling her he was going to beat her when he got out, telling her he was going to choke her, telling her he was going to kill her. And Sarah, having been abused by this man for years, believed him. She was terrified. She thought if she let him out, he would hurt her, maybe kill her. So she left him in there, not to kill him, but to protect herself, to keep herself safe. Owens looks at the jury and says, Sarah Boone had a reasonable belief of imminent harm. She acted in self-defense. She did what she had to do to protect herself from a violent man who had terrorized her for years. He says the videos don't tell the whole story. He says the jury needs to understand the context, the history, the abuse, the fear. And then he says something dramatic. There's no higher calling than to right a wrong. We're going to ask you to right this wrong and find Sarah Boone not guilty because she was justified in the force she used to defend herself. Owens sits down. The battle lines are drawn. Prosecution says murder. Defense says self-defense. Now comes the evidence. Over the next 2 weeks, the jury hears from dozens of witnesses. They hear testimony from Jorge's family, from Sarah's family, from neighbors, from police officers, from medical examiners, from forensic experts. They see evidence. Photos of the crime scene. Photos of the suitcase. Photos of Jorge's body. Videos from Sarah's phone. The autopsy report. Police reports. Everything that's relevant to the case. And piece by piece, the prosecution builds their case. They start with Jorge's brother, Victor Torres. He testifies about Jorge's life, his childhood in Philadelphia, his 3 children, his struggles with alcohol, his relationship with Sarah. He describes Jorge as someone who had his demons but loved his family, someone who tried to be a good father, someone who didn't deserve to die the way he did. Victor breaks down crying on the stand when he talks about how his brother died. The jury watches. Some of them wipe away tears. The prosecution calls Sarah's ex-husband, Brian Boone. He testifies that Sarah called him on February 24, 2020, before she called 911. She told him Jorge was dead. He says she was frantic, crying, saying she didn't know what happened. He says he told her to hang up and call 911 immediately. He says he was shocked. He had known Sarah and Jorge's relationship was troubled, but he never thought it would end like this. Next, the jury hears from neighbors. Pearl Walker testifies that she lived in the same apartment complex as Sarah and Jorge. She says she heard them arguing almost every single day. Loud, violent arguments. Screaming. Things breaking. She says it was constant. She says she once saw Sarah with bruises and a black eye. She says she knew the relationship was abusive, but she didn't know what to do. She says she wishes she had called for help. Orange County deputies who had responded to domestic violence calls at Sarah and Jorge's apartment testify about what they witnessed. They describe arriving at the apartment multiple times over the years. They describe both Sarah and Jorge with injuries. They describe both of them being arrested at different times for violence against each other. They paint a picture of a deeply dysfunctional, mutually abusive relationship. Then comes the medical examiner. Dr. Gregory Young, who performed Jorge's autopsy, takes the stand. He testifies that Jorge Torres died from suffocation, that his cause of death was asphyxia due to being confined in a small, enclosed space for an extended period of time. He describes Jorge's injuries, contusions on his forehead, shoulder, and skull, scratches on his neck and back, bruising on his hands, a busted lip, blood in his mouth. He says these injuries are consistent with someone who was trapped and fighting to escape, someone who was thrashing, hitting the walls, trying to break free. The jury looks uncomfortable as they listen to this testimony. They're imagining what Jorge went through, the terror, the pain, the slow death. Crime scene investigator Melissa Ruffgarden takes the stand next. She brings the actual suitcase into the courtroom, the blue hardshell suitcase. Evidence item number 1. She unzips it. She opens it. She shows the jury how small it is inside. She gets a tape measure. She measures the interior dimensions. The jury can see clearly that a grown man would have to curl up tight to fit inside. She explains how Jorge would have been positioned. Knees to chest, head tucked, arms pinned, unable to move, unable to stretch, unable to breathe properly. And then comes the moment everyone has been waiting for. The prosecution plays the videos, the ones found on Sarah's phone. The courtroom falls completely silent as the first video plays on a large screen. Everyone watches. The jury, the judge, Jorge's family, Sarah herself. You can hear Jorge's voice, clear, desperate. Sarah, I can't breathe, babe. Sarah, please, let me out. And you can hear Sarah's voice, laughing, cold, cruel. That's what you do when you choke me. That's what I feel like when you cheat on me. The video plays for about 30 seconds. Then the second video plays. More of the same. Jorge begging, Sarah taunting. When the videos end, the courtroom is dead silent. Several jurors are wiping their eyes. Some look angry. Some look horrified. Jorge's mother is crying in the gallery. Sarah sits at the defense table, staring straight ahead, showing no emotion. The prosecution rests their case. Now it's the defense's turn to present their evidence. Those videos are absolutely chilling. If you've made it this far, you're watching one of the most disturbing trials in recent history. We're about to get to Sarah's testimony, where she takes the stand to defend herself. But first, smash that like button, share, subscribe, and hit the bell. If you're hooked on this case like I am, comment below and tell me, after seeing those videos, do you think there's any way Sarah walks free? Let's find out. The defense opens their case by calling Dr. Julie Harper to the stand. Dr. Harper is a behavioral health expert who conducted a court-ordered psychological evaluation of Sarah Boone while she was in jail awaiting trial. Dr. Harper testifies that she spent several hours interviewing Sarah. She administered psychological tests. She reviewed Sarah's medical records, police reports, and other documents. And based on her evaluation, Dr. Harper has conclusions. She testifies that Sarah Boone has narcissistic personality traits. She displays patterns of behavior consistent with narcissism, a need for attention, a lack of empathy, a tendency to blame others. But, Dr. Harper clarifies, Sarah doesn't meet the full diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. She's just on the spectrum of narcissistic behavior. Dr. Harper also testifies that Sarah suffers from anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. She says Sarah has symptoms consistent with someone who has experienced long-term trauma. And most importantly for the defense, Dr. Harper confirms that Sarah was experiencing battered spouse syndrome at the time of Jorge's death. This is a recognized psychological condition where victims of chronic domestic abuse develop a heightened sense of danger and a belief that their abuser will kill them. But during cross-examination, prosecutor Dave Cacciatore asks Dr. Harper some tough questions. He asks if she's certain that Sarah's actions on February 23rd were caused by PTSD or trauma. Dr. Harper admits she's not certain. She says when Sarah described that night to her, Sarah said they were laughing and having a good time, drinking wine, playing games. That doesn't fit the pattern of someone experiencing trauma triggers or acting out of fear. Dr. Harper says it's possible Sarah was afraid of Jorge in general, based on past abuse, but it's not clear that she was acting out of imminent fear on that specific night. That's a problem for the defense, because self-defense requires a reasonable belief of imminent harm, not just general fear, not just past trauma, but a specific, immediate belief that you're about to be hurt or killed. And the evidence, even from their own expert, doesn't support that. And then comes the moment everyone has been waiting for, the moment that will make or break Sarah's case. The defense calls Sarah Boone to the stand. Sarah stands up from the defense table. She's wearing a conservative outfit. Her hair is pulled back. She looks nervous. She walks to the witness box, raises her right hand, swears to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then she sits down. Her attorney, James Owens, begins asking her questions, gently, slowly, leading her through her story. Sarah describes her relationship with Jorge. She says they met a few years before his death. She says at first, things were good. He was nice, charming, funny. But then he started drinking more, getting angry more, hitting her. She describes years of alleged abuse. She says Jorge choked her multiple times. She says he stabbed her once. She says he raped her. She says he kicked her, punched her, spit on her. She says she lived in constant terror of him. She says she tried to leave, but he threatened to kill her if she did. She says she felt trapped, powerless, afraid for her life every single day. Sarah describes February 23, 2020. She says they had been drinking wine throughout the day. She says they were getting along well. No fighting. No arguments. Just drinking and relaxing. She says as evening came, they decided to play hide and seek. She says Jorge suggested getting in the suitcase. She says he thought it would be funny. She says he climbed in willingly, laughing, joking. She says she zipped him up. And at first it was funny to her too. But then, Sarah says, Jorge started yelling at her from inside the suitcase. She says he started threatening her, telling her he was going to beat her when he got out, telling her he was going to choke her, telling her he was going to kill her. She says she panicked. She says she was terrified. She says all the years of abuse came flooding back. All the times he had hurt her. All the times he had threatened her. And she believed him. She believed he would kill her if she let him out. So she didn't. She left him in there, not to kill him, but to protect herself. Sarah testifies for approximately 5 hours. She answers questions from her attorney. She cries multiple times. She describes her fear, her trauma, her desperation. And when her attorney is done, she thinks maybe she's convinced the jury. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll see that she was a victim too. But then comes cross-examination. Prosecutor Dave Cacciatore stands up. He walks towards Sarah, and he starts asking questions. Hard questions. Questions Sarah doesn't want to answer. He asks her, "Why didn't you unzip the suitcase when Jorge said he couldn't breathe?" Sarah pauses, thinks, then says, "I wanted him to try to understand how I felt, so maybe he could progress and be a better person." The courtroom goes silent. That's not self-defense. That's punishment. That's revenge. Cacciatore presses. "So you left him in there to teach him a lesson?" Sarah backtracks. "No, I was scared." Cacciatore asks, "Did you do anything to help Jorge escape from that suitcase?" Sarah answers quietly, "No." Cacciatore asks, "You hit his hand with a baseball bat when he tried to unzip it, didn't you?" Sarah admits, "Yes." Cacciatore asks, "Because you didn't want him to get out?" Sarah says, "I was afraid of what he would do." Cacciatore shows Sarah the videos, makes her watch them, forces her to listen to Jorge begging, listen to herself laughing. He asks, "Does this sound like someone who's afraid for their life?" Sarah doesn't have a good answer. She says she was drunk. She says she doesn't remember it clearly. She says she was traumatized. But it's weak. The jury can see through it. Sarah's testimony has hurt her case more than helped it. When she finally steps down from the witness stand, she looks defeated. And the defense rests. The evidence phase is over. Now comes closing arguments. October 25, 2024. Closing arguments begin in the Sarah Boone murder trial. This is each side's last chance to convince the jury. Their final opportunity to summarize the evidence and explain why their version of events is the truth. The prosecution goes first. Prosecutor Dave Cacciatore stands before the jury. He holds up the blue suitcase, the actual suitcase Jorge died in. He looks at each juror, and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, no reasonably prudent and cautious person would believe that a man who could barely fit into this box, who was incapable of movement, who was begging for his life, who was slowly asphyxiating, suffocating with each breath, needed to have deadly force used against him." He pauses, lets that statement hang in the air, then continues, "Sarah Boone was not in danger. She had all the power. Jorge Torres was helpless, trapped, dying, and she let it happen. She didn't call for help. She didn't unzip the suitcase. She didn't try to save him. She recorded videos of his suffering and then went to bed." Cacciatore addresses the defense's claim of battered spouse syndrome. He says, "Even if you believe Sarah was abused, and there's evidence that both of them were violent toward each other, that doesn't justify what she did. Self-defense requires an imminent threat. Jorge Torres was locked in a suitcase. He weighed 103 pounds. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He wasn't a threat to anyone. Sarah Boone took the law into her own hands. She decided Jorge deserved to suffer. She decided he deserved to die. and that is murder. The defense gives their closing argument next. James Owens stands before the jury. He reminds them of the abuse Sarah suffered, the trauma, the fear. He says, Sarah Boone is a victim. She lived in terror of this man for years. And on that night, when he threatened her from inside the suitcase, she believed him. She believed he would kill her if she let him out. She acted to protect herself. But it's not enough. The jury has seen the evidence. They've heard the testimony. They've watched the videos. And they've made up their minds. After closing arguments, the jury is given instructions by Judge Cranick. They're told about the law, about the elements of second-degree murder, about what the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And then they're sent to deliberate. It's approximately 5 p.m. The jury leaves the courtroom. Everyone waits. Jorge's family sits in the gallery, holding hands, praying for justice. Sarah sits at the defense table with her attorney, trying to appear calm. Less than 2 hours later, at 7:30 p.m., there's a knock on the jury room door. They have a verdict. Everyone files back into the courtroom. The jury enters. The judge asks, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson stands. "We have, Your Honor." The judge asks for the verdict form. It's handed to him. He reads it silently, then hands it to the court clerk to read aloud. The clerk stands. In the case of the state of Florida versus Sarah Boone, on the charge of second-degree murder, we the jury find the defendant, Sarah Boone, guilty. The courtroom erupts. Jorge's family members cry. They hug each other. Justice. Finally, Sarah Boone shows no emotion. She stares straight ahead. Her attorney puts his hand on her shoulder. She's just been convicted of murder. She's facing life in prison. December 2nd, 2024. Sarah Boone returns to court for sentencing. Before the judge delivers the sentence, Jorge's family members are given the opportunity to speak. His mother, Blanca Torres, stands at the podium. Tears stream down her face. She says, "Sarah didn't just kill my son. She killed a father, a brother, an uncle. My son was my baby, and now he's gone. Sometimes I look out the window and I'm still waiting for him to come home, to walk through the door, to say, 'Mom, I love you.' But he never will, because Sarah Boone took him from us." Jorge's sister, Victoria Torres, speaks next. She says Sarah has caused a lifetime of pain to their family, that they'll never be the same. Jorge's daughter, Ana Victoria Torres, tells the court that losing her father has left her with chronic depression and anxiety. She says for the first year after his death, she woke up screaming every morning, wishing it was all a nightmare, only to remember it was real. Her father was really gone, forever. Sarah is given a chance to speak before sentencing. She stands, looks at the judge, and says, "I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster. Jorge Torres abused me for years. He hurt me in ways I can't even describe. But I still loved him. I still hoped he would change. I'm sorry for what happened. But I was a victim too." The judge listens, then delivers the sentence. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Sarah Boone will spend the rest of her life behind bars for what she did to Jorge Torres. She's taken from the courtroom in handcuffs, led back to her cell, where she'll stay forever. Today, Sarah sits in a Florida state prison. She's filed an appeal. She's on her 13th attorney now. But legal experts say her chances of overturning the conviction are slim. The evidence was too strong. The video's too damning. The jury made their decision. Jorge Torres Jr. is buried in Philadelphia, near his family. His children visit his grave. His mother still waits by the window. His siblings still mourn. And this case stands as a reminder that domestic violence destroys lives, that toxic relationships can turn deadly, and that when someone dies, there are real consequences. Justice was served for Jorge Torres, but it came too late. He's still gone, and Sarah Boone still laughs in those videos. That's the Suitcase murder. Jorge's life is a reminder that every story matters. Not just the end, but the full journey. May his loved ones find comfort in his memory, and may his life inspire compassion and humanity in all of us. Rest in peace, Jorge. You are gone from our sight, but not from our hearts. That was one of the most disturbing cases I've ever covered. If this story impacted you, hit that like button, share, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notification for more deep dives into shocking true crime cases. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about the verdict. Was justice served? Could this have been prevented? And what case should I cover next? If you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. There are resources available. You deserve to be safe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.